Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Micah and today I just quickly wanted to come on here and talk to you about 10 beauty community favorite eyeshadow palettes that a lot of people are always raving about that I personally don't own. If you saw my eyeshadow palette collection, you may have gotten the impression that I own about every single eyeshadow palette there is on the planet. That's definitely not the case. There are a couple of very popular eyeshadow palettes that I just never really was interested in, and hence they are not in my collection, because I definitely try to pick and choose, and just because something is popular doesn't mean that I go out and buy everything that there is available. So let's just get to these eyeshadows. If you're wondering what I'm wearing on my eyes today, I just filmed a palette bingo with 3 of the Essence Disney Princess eyeshadow palettes. So that video will already be up, so I'll make sure to link it in the eye above. I hope this doesn't throw off my focus, move a little bit so I have a bit of space to also show you pictures of these eyeshadow palettes as I'm talking about them. So let's go. I've selected 10 of these, and the first one that I wanted to mention is Morphe. I don't really have a lot of Morphe palettes, even though a lot of them have been raved about a lot. So I think that the palette that really got Morphe on everyone's agenda was the 35O, and I remembered that being the palette to get on YouTube. And it's a bunch of browns with a couple of oranges, and I was like, why is this so popular? Like, I definitely have bought eyeshadow palettes that sort of afterwards became like popular because of Morphe setting that trend with like a couple of oranges in their palettes, but they definitely aren't my favorite kind of like color scheme. So I already kind of knew that back then, and I had tried a little bit of Morphe and I wasn't wowed by their formula either. So I just didn't really see the merit in getting it. Plus, those really big palettes, I had one of those like 88 palettes that were all the rage way back when. And as I started sort of growing my collection, I felt that the more eyeshadow I had, those really large palettes didn't really make a lot of sense anymore. So that's why I definitely passed up on it. It was too big, and the color scheme just didn't really fit with my makeup aesthetic, which is why I passed up on the Morphe 35O. The second palette I want to mention is another Morphe palette, and I think in terms of an influencer who did really well with a Morphe collab, I definitely think James Charles is like one of the biggest releases we had last year, and everybody was going crazy for it. And then there were all the videos of people saying these eyeshadows stain because some of them are pressed pigments and all that. Like, there was a lot of drama about it. But again, just the sheer size of the Morphe James Charles palette made me not want to get it. So the whole thing with like 39 shades and it being like this big, and I'm like, how do I store that? Where do I keep it? I don't even have space on my makeup table, you guys, for such a large palette. And even though it was supposed to be like a palette that can do everything, I know I wouldn't use it because I'd rather, like, I either go for like neutrals or I go for color. So I sort of already have all of those things in my collection in smaller, much more manageable for me palettes. So that's why I was like, I just have no need for a palette that is again, this big and has a lot of shades that I already have in my collection, or that I know I just won't be using a lot. So that's another reason why I passed up on the James Charles palette. For my third palette that I didn't get, I think that Jeffree Star's brand, like, definitely started, like, I was completely against everything Jeffree Star for a long time because of like statements he made in the past, and like I was a bit sometimes like uncomfortable with how he presented himself as well online. And I think that when Blood Sugar released, that was sort of when his brand came a little bit more on the radar for me. But when I sort of like looked at it more closely, I mean, around the same time, or maybe it had already been released or I bought the palette, I'm not sure, but I bought the Lime Crime Venus XL palette, which has like berries and reds and like a couple of neutrals in there. I call that the Modern Renaissance on Steroids palette. And so for me, it was sort of like between those two. And I went with the Lime Crime in the end because I felt that that color story worked better for me. With the Jeffree Star palette, what has always irked me a little bit is that you get like a handful of really bright pops of colors, and then everything else can be quite neutral. And I feel that that's also the case in the Blood Sugar palette. This is why I bought the Jawbreaker and the Blue Blood, because I feel that they definitely favor color over neutrals. Even though I like a few neutrals to really tie a look together, I just felt that especially a couple of the earlier palettes, like the Thirsty and the Blood Sugar, favored neutrals and then had these really bright pops. And then because it was in very fun packaging, like especially the Blood Sugar, I feel has this issue because the base of the palette is red. It makes everything looks more interesting than it actually is. So I really felt with the Blood Sugar, if you cover up a few of the interesting shades, it's like a neutral palette. So for me, it didn't really warrant the price point, and at the time, of course, it sold out super quickly. And at the time, I also think Jeffree Star wasn't available in stores yet here, which is another reason why I'm always a little bit more apprehensive. If I can only get it online and I can't swatch it and test it in store, I always think twice before I put my money towards something. So that's always, you know, like I was unfamiliar with the brand, but that palette did sort of get me more interested in the brand and make me check it out a little bit more, if that makes sense. But I never bought it, and I'm currently also not interested in it because I feel I have palettes that can do something very similarly. Fourthly, I wanted to also mention the Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette here. A lot of people say it's one of Too Faced's best eyeshadow palettes in terms of formula. I never got it because it was released later than the Urban Decay Heavy Metals palette, which is an all shimmer palette. And if I want like all of these like super intense foily shades, I have it in that. I don't need the Too Faced palette for that, even though it does have a couple of matte neutrals in the palette, which I think is why it appeals to so many people, because you can do everything. It's just that when I look at that palette, there are only 2 or 3 shades I would get it for. I really like the shimmery green that's in there, and there's also like a really nice like intense like silver, I believe. That pink that is in there really intrigues me too. But the one thing that throws me off, and I know it's called the chocolate gold, so it makes sense from the brand's perspective, but it has that really large yellow gold. And I don't like like that kind of yellow gold just never really looks right on me, I feel. So since that's such a large pan, like if that had been the silver, this would have definitely caught my attention a little bit more. But since I already have a really great shimmer palette that has all of those shades and then some, I just felt that the Too Faced Chocolate Gold was a bit superfluous. The only reason why I would get it if I eventually decide to get it is to complete my chocolate bar family. Like that would be my only reason for it, which I don't think is a good reason to do it, to put my money towards it. So that's why the Too Faced Chocolate Gold, I never got it. A palette that's long since been discontinued, but that as it was being discontinued really got like another boost on YouTube, was the Urban Decay Electric palette. And I've mentioned this palette in like anti-hauls and like other videos before, why I don't own it. Sure, it's a really fun, bright palette, and I definitely think it paved the way for more mainstream brands also putting out more colorful eyeshadows. But I do think that the palette itself, to me, at the time it was released, was too limiting. It only has 10 shades, and the packaging I found to be quite bulky for how much product you get. So that was something that I didn't like. And while it has a like nice, really bright, almost like orangey neon shade, that's what everybody goes on about. Plus that lime green that's in there. I don't like how it has like 3 blues that are very similar. Like, to me, that didn't make sense. You only get like, what, 10 shades, and 3 of them are identical blues. And to me, that just didn't really make a lot of sense. There was only one shade in this palette that really intrigued me, which was Fringe, but they re-released that in the After Dark palette, and so I bought that and not the Electric. So that's why I still have Fringe. I still have the one shade in the Electric palette that I did like, but I skipped out on the rest because I just wasn't into it. Number 6 then, another Morphe palette that everybody loves is the Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette. I don't own it because, again, it's too big. Plus it has 4 like blues, greens, turquoises. It has a purple and like a darker green as well. There's like, out of the 35 shades, there are like 4 or 5 of them that are truly interesting, but especially those 2 top rows with all of those very identical mattes or like variations and undertones of like the same shades. That to me is why I don't like Morphe, which is why when I finally did put some money towards a Morphe palette, I went with the Jaclyn Hill Vault because I felt it just had a lot more variety in shades, and I like how it's 4 different palettes with like a color scheme to them. They have very comprehensive color stories, and mine worked fine. Like the quality of them was fine. I have no issues with them, and they are some of the more unique shadows in my collection. So I'm glad I held out and got the Vault collection instead of the bigger Jaclyn Hill palette. I know it's like everyone's staple still for a lot of people today, but to me it's just like I have my staples and I don't need anything that big. 7, a little bit of a newer release is the Huda Beauty New Nude, which was released I think around this time last year, I feel. And the new Nude was definitely, when I saw it, I was like, ooh, that's definitely up my alley. I love rosy tones, you guys. You know that about me. Urban Decay Naked 3 is one of my all-time favorite palettes, so it would make sense for me to be interested in this palette. But then I found out that the left bottom shade is a cream, and I hate to have creams and powders in the same palette. So that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to get it. Plus I think it has 2 or 3 of the very chunky pressed glitters. The reason why I have the Desert Dusk and for instance not the rose gold textured is because I don't really love pressed glitters in a palette. So the Desert Dusk only has 1 of them, and that I find acceptable, but to have like 2 or 3 of them plus that cream in an 18 pan eyeshadow palette, I was like, that's like 4 shades I will never use. So to me, it just didn't really make for a really good deal, you could say, because Huda Beauty palettes are definitely quite expensive. So for me not to be able to use all the shades, it just made me a little bit like, no, I don't need it. So I definitely waited because Selfridges stocks Huda Beauty, so when I was in London earlier in the year, I definitely had to play around with the palette and swatched everything. And I love the mattes and those like weird shimmers that look like they have like little specks in them. Those are lovely. But the pressed glitters and also that cream, the cream is too dark for my skin tone. It's too yellow. And it's also like 3 shades too dark for my complexion too. So it looks a bit obvious if I were to use it. So to me, that's why the new Nude just didn't have a place in my collection, and I held off of buying it. And now I'm really happy because she released those new Nude Obsessions palettes, so I picked up 2 of those. I have the same amount of shades, no creams, no glitters, and I still have berry rosy tones that suit my skin tone. Yay! So sometimes people, it pays off to hold off of not buying everything straight away. Palette number 8 that I wanted to mention is the Tartelette palette by Tarte. The first one, I mean, so the all matte purpley one. While it has really stunning cool tones, I just don't really use all matte palettes all that much. So to me, when this was released, I was like, that's boring. I have the In Bloom and I have the Toasted. So again, completing a set, like I'm a bit of a completionist, you know that about me. So I very often like to have all the palettes in a different line, but I still haven't caved and bought the Tartelette because I just feel it doesn't really have anything to offer that is unique to my collection, even though I love the mattes in my other Tartelette palettes and I really like Tarte eyeshadow. I can't deny that. But yeah, I just felt that this all matte Tartelette palette didn't really have a place in my collection. I remember when it came out a couple of years ago, someone at Sephora when I was traveling was definitely trying to steer me towards that sort of kind of palette, and I was like looking at it, I was like, no, just no. Palette number 9 then, the Wet n Wild Comfort Zone. There aren't a lot of drugstore palettes in here, and the Comfort Zone is of course one that everybody is always raving about. They've definitely redone it now, so there are a few mattes in it, but one of the reasons why I never picked that up was because it was all shimmer. Before at least. So the old style palette had all shimmer and it just really wasn't my cup of tea. And also the like the shades in there I feel I already have. I know everybody's going in for like that more like duochrome shade that it has, but I have that shade now in like other palettes, so I feel I don't really need the Comfort Zone. I definitely thought about it when I was in New York, checked it out, and I was like, I really don't need this. And then last but not least, the 10th palette I would like to mention is the Viseart First like Neutral Mattes, I believe it's called, like the version 1 with that little pop of orange in the middle. I have one Viseart palette. I bought the Sultry Muse when I decided to try the brand. And while the quality of these shadows is really nice, I think they are a bit expensive for what they are. You do get a boatload of product though, don't get me wrong. And this is a palette that I've been on the fence about for a very long time, the Sultry Muse I mean, because I've been trying to declutter it and then I keep it because there's a few shades that I do really like. I've now found out that I might be able to pull that one shade that I love and put it in a like Z palette or something like that, so I might want to do that, but because I'm just not using my Sultry Muse all that much, I never bought any other Viseart palettes because I just really like having a mix of shimmer and mattes in my palettes, and with Viseart focusing really on one type of product in their palettes, great for makeup artists, not something I need as a consumer. That's just how I feel. So there you have it. Those are 10 eyeshadow palettes that are very, very popular with a lot of people here on YouTube that I personally don't own, and some of the reasons why I decided to pass up on them. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. And if you could leave a comment down below with what palettes did you not decide to get? Like, I would be very interested to know, and let's chat a little bit more in the comments about eyeshadow palettes, which is my favorite thing in the world. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!